welcome everyone to the Tuesday class today. And a special welcome to those who are new. And each time, if there are some new folks, then we spend 5 minutes just going very briefly over some of the basics of meditation so that when it comes to following the instructions for meditation, you're not left in a quandary. So meditation generally, you probably heard lots of good things about meditation, how it can help you relax, sleep better, overcome depression and stress and so on. And all those things have evidence for them. But the question of how one actually does meditation is not that hard to understand, although there are many different ways of meditating. But generally speaking, there are ways of working with a part of ourselves that is often neglected. And it's neglected because it's not so easy to see. It's not something you can go and get an X-ray of, or an MRI scan, or a CCAT scan, or any other of the scans you're likely to get offered at the doctor's. But it's something which is more subjective. Probably an easier way to talk about it is to say it's your sense of awareness or your focus of attention. Rather nebulous, but it's something which is pulled away from you by all the distractions in your life. Some of those distractions are ones that you probably haven't chosen for yourself. The way we live our lives today, then there are so many things out there trying to hold your attention hostage. And it's like there's a constant fight for your attention. Who can keep your attention more in the way we live our lives? So it's all very well to be attentive to the things around you and aware and interested in what's going on around you in your life. But there comes a point where sometimes it's quite exhausting for us. We need times of the day when we can get our attention to come back from all those things, back to a place closer to ourselves, where we can focus inwardly or allow the awareness or attention to have some downtime. And the way meditation understands that can happen is that if we can refocus or reposition our awareness to a place inside of us, instead of letting it be outside, then it gets the chance to recharge, rather like you might take your mobile phone and put it in the charger occasionally in order to charge out the battery so that you can use it again. The place that's like the charging point for the mind, in this tradition, we understand it to be a place somewhere around the solar plexus. So at the very center of ourselves, if we were to breathe our deepest breath, then the point where the breath turns around between the in-breath and the out-breath, that is the point we're talking about. So we'd like to relocate our mind to that point. A very simple way to do this is to use some sort of imagined picture in the mind. So if you might try thinking of a picture like that of the sun shining, and then relocate that picture to a place inside your belly, then that will be a way to get your mind to go to the center of yourself, to a place where it's more likely to be able to relax and calm down. Having a picture like that inside of yourself tells you two useful things. Firstly, where your mind is, because it's the same place as you see the picture. And also how good is your concentration, because the longer the picture stays with you, then the better is your concentration. If your mind wanders off, it's not the end of the world, you just bring it back again to that picture inside yourself. That's the basics of the meditation. And I will say that for some people it's more of a feeling than a picture, and that's just fine. You can use the same principle there. Generally, with any meditation, we do two things before we even start our meditation exercise, which is we try to make sure our body is relaxed. A good posture, a relaxing posture, a balance between being awake but also relaxed. The posture has something to do with that. We try to sit with our back fairly straight, even as all of you are sitting on chairs. Try to sit with your back fairly sort of upright, rather than sort of slouching. The way to put our hands together is with the right hand on top of the left hand. The index finger of the right hand goes up against the thumb of the left hand. And our hands just rest palm upwards in our lap. And the idea of that hand posture is to give us a little bit of a advance warning in case we get sleepy halfway through. Generally, the finger will slip out of place to give us a little bit of warning. After relaxing our body, scanning down, relaxing the muscles, generally we then do the same thing for our mind by putting aside any immediate worries or concerns that are cluttering up our mind. So emptying our mind, putting our mind in a positive frame as far as possible, and then only then doing this exercise with imagining the sun inside of ourselves. Some people have a problem with a lot of interrupting thoughts in the mind. There are two ways to deal with that. The easiest way is just to ignore the thoughts as far as possible. If you ignore them long enough, generally they will die down by themselves. But for some people, that just isn't cutting it for them. They need a slightly more hands-on way of dealing with the thoughts, in which case you might try using the suggested mantra you can see there, the words Samma Arahang, hearing the sound of those words rather than saying them out loud, passing through your mind over and over again as a way to basically block the thoughts. So the thoughts will quieten down more quickly than if you just leave them to their own devices. So far so good. So we'll meditate this evening for about a half an hour. That's our usual Tuesday night length of meditation. And after that, then I'll continue with our wisdom talk for today, which is about learnedness. So are you sitting comfortably? So when you're ready, start by closing your eyes very gently. Close your eyes in much the same way you might close your eyes to go to sleep. And find a comfortable sitting position for yourself. You can sit on the floor with the support of a cushion or a pillow. You can sit on a chair or a meditation mat. Wherever your feeling tells you that you'll meditate the best. And notice the flow of your in-breath as it follows down into your lungs and down to the center of your diaphragm. And let the sense of relaxation expand from within you, as if you are inundated with a tide of relaxation. And the first thing we do is what's known as a body scan, which means scanning down through the whole of the body, relaxing each and every muscle as we go. We start at our forehead, relaxing our eyebrows and our eyelids. And even the way we close our eyes is quite important, because it sets the scene for the whole of the meditation ahead. Often it's as if we haven't completely closed our eyes. It's as if our upper and lower eyelashes are touching only very gently together. We let the muscles of our face become soft, especially relaxing our jaw and taking care that we're not clenching our teeth together. Then we relax our shoulders, letting them drop to their natural height. From there we relax both arms, forearms, and our hands and fingers, so they rest only very gently in our lap. Continuing on down, we relax all the muscles of our torso, our chest, trunk, across our belly, both legs, all the way down to our feet and our toes, until eventually the whole of our body feels as if it's become light in weight or has disappeared into the atmosphere around us, so that we have no more worries about our body anymore. From there we turn our attention inward, this time to spend a few moments relaxing the mind, letting go of any worries or concerns still lingering on our mind, not letting our mind drift to regrets in our past or plans for the future. But we do our best to keep our mind in the present moment. And we conjure up in our mind a sense of happiness and joy, as if happiness and joy were tiny particles completely filling our body and mind. From there we imagine our whole body has been transformed into a sort of hollow cavity or transparent shell with nothing on the inside. For some of you who've been meditating longer, it may be as if the body has disappeared completely, and it's just like inhabiting some great empty space of your own creation. And for those of you who are new to meditation, you might like to recall the image of a bright, shining sun, or a full moon, or a star, down at the center of the body, as if you were breathing it down slowly until it comes to rest at the deepest point of your breath. Or as if you are gently swallowing that bright object all the way down until it reaches the pit of your stomach. You just imagine it and it's already there. It doesn't matter whether it's clear or well focused. Even if it's vague, we can work with that. Even if it's a feeling, we can also work with a feeling. It may be a moon-shaped object with a tiny diamond sparkling at its center, which may give a slightly different feeling, but you'll be able to tell that by yourself, subjectively, observing the feeling of happiness derived from that inner object. with or without the tiny diamond pinpoint at its center. If you're a frequent meditator, it won't take you long to reconnect with that inner light. And we just let that bright inner light pervade the whole of our body. The origin of the bright light will always be the center of the body. And it's a sort of light of serenity. So we allow that diamond light to shine on through like a perpetual flame of peace, shining through the whole of our body. So we continue to relax further still, deeper into contentment, deeper into that sense of luminescence inside us. And if we find that there are thoughts arising in the mind, we do our best to ignore them. By not giving the thoughts the time of day, little by little they will start to die down by themselves. Or if we find that thoughts are a constant irritation, then we might make use of that mantra or thought blocker in our mind by hearing the sound of the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, over and over again in the mind. For as long as it takes for our mind to settle down into silence with nothing but that bright, clear object at the center of ourselves. If our mind wanders, we bring it back. If the inner object disappears, we can think of a new one. But if it transforms, then we just follow it in its new form. And our practice becomes one of observation rather than visualization. Applying the mind gently, lightly, continuously in this way for a few more moments now in silence until we come to the appropriate time. Continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body the whole of the time. Lightly, gently, and continuously, with whatever inner object we have built up for ourselves in the meditation so far. We can reconnect with that sense of light at any time by making a feather-light touch at the center of ourselves. With practice, we'll be able to stay with that sense of brightness inside ourselves for longer and longer periods of time, to the point where when we close our eyes, it's as if there's no longer darkness on the inside of us anymore. We find that sense of brightness is a connection between our mind and a sense of serenity on the inside. Every time we're able to make that connection with the center of ourself, and there'll be an overwhelming sense of contentment. Sometimes the inner object may be brighter, sometimes it may be rather dim. But there's no need to force the object to become brighter or even to constrain the brightness. Instead of trying to hem in the brightness, we allow the object on the inside to be free. Free to shine forth, or free to give an inner feeling of well-being, and the freedom to expand without limits. In this way, the meditation experience will unfold itself in a way that keeps on deepening the path for us. If you find yourself assuming that this is it in the meditation, then you should remind yourself that it's not always going to be like that. All you need to do is make sure that you make space for whatever new experience arises in the mind, without a sense of should or ought in the sentence. It ought to be more of an invitation to the experience rather than a controlling experience. You need to make sure your inner experience is your friend rather than a stranger to you. So you need to listen to that sense of inner experience with a sensitive ear. The same tenderness of a parent attending a child. If you can listen with a sensitive ear and a tender heart to your own inner life, then you'll discover the true nature of your being, which is vast and complex, with amazing capacities for self-regulation and healing. But for now, with a sincere heart, we allow that inner experience to be the light before the dawn that foretells the manifestation of the true core of your being, whereby insight and wisdom become naturally available to you, whatever and whenever it needs to be called upon. You don't need to feel resigned to any inner experience you have, rather just accept it. Because acceptance makes an embodied space around your experience allowing it to change. Don't constrain the experience, don't intellectualize. When we feel things in our body, there's a natural sense of care elicited. Because we have to spend so long with our attention externalized, everything within us is yearning to be more interior. Just to discover what we've been neglecting for so long. So we keep on checking in with ourselves as to what our deepest intention is. Our deepest awareness can use meditation as a vehicle to recognize itself and its luminosity, its compassion, allowing us to come to the fullness of being and to make sure our ego doesn't focus our mind unskillfully, so that we can remain fresh, honest, and gentle in our practice, occupying a space that nourishes our natural well-being, and continuing in this way for a few more moments in silence. As we apply our awareness at the center, remember to use no force at all. Sometimes the inner object may be visible, sometimes it may be hidden. It will come and sometimes it will go. But when it returns, we welcome it back with love. We recall the inner object with a sense of love and compassion, and very soon it will come back to the center, in the middle of the brightness again. So we continue with that overwhelming feeling of relaxation, in touch with the brightness that nourishes our inward life. We can also share this kind of bright light by radiating the brightness outwards in all directions, beyond the boundaries of our own body, expanding it ever outwards for the benefit of all living beings, allowing that sphere of brightness to grow bigger and bigger all the time in an endless process, allowing that realness to touch us on the deepest level of the axis of the mind. As we remain at our center just for a few more moments in silence until we come to the appropriate time. Sape Buddha Balapata Pachekanancha Yambalang Arahantanancha Tejena Arakam Bandami Sabaso Sapabuddha Nupavena Sapadhamma Nupavena Sapasangha Nupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. If you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So far, so good, everyone. And you folks have something to focus on inside as you're meditating? So who had more of a visual thing to focus on? Yes, some. And some more of a feeling? Yes. So either of those work perfectly well, and I hope that you take it further in future meditations. For today, the talk I'd like to give is to do with learning, and the idea of learning, which I'm going to talk about today, is that the more you have learned or the more knowledge you have, it can be a major blessing to you in life. Not the only blessing, of course, but as the talk I'm giving today is part of a series called the 38 Blessings of Life, then we come today to number 7 of the 38. And there have been some that have preceded this already, 6 in fact, mostly to do with turning our back on any bad habits in our life and turning towards any new good habits. So hopefully we have already done that by the time we come to the point of becoming more learned. The sort of things that I've already talked about were things like keeping an eye out for not getting in with the wrong sort of friends, and most recently, almost finding a sense of direction by which you can start to work on yourself in terms of self-transformation in a useful way. So having oriented oneself in the proper direction, the thing which comes as the first step towards becoming self-sufficient in life in a way that you can then concentrate on more spiritual aspects, is having the knowledge by which one can stand on one's own 2 feet. And generally one would immediately think of getting some sort of training and education that will allow us to do something useful for society and at the same time to be able to earn an honest living. Yeah? And this is seen to be a blessing. Not the only blessing, but it's something that we will build upon. If we have that knowledge, then we can then do something with it. So within this grouping of blessings, learning is just one part of it. But having become learned, we need to then work on that in order to learn how to apply what we know, what would be known as craftsmanship. Having got the knowledge and the craftsmanship, then what we will see after that is that we need to have some sort of ethical awareness to know how to channel our skills and knowledge into something that is generally useful and it's not going to take advantage of others. And last but not least, being able to be skillful even in the ways we communicate with others as well. This is what this grouping of blessings to do with making oneself useful comprises of 4 parts. Today I'll talk about the first part of this, at least the first half of the first part of it. So in the old days, I used to say things like, oh, going to school, everyone knows that that is useful. But in recent years, especially as I'm sort of involved in the educational side of things is that there has been increasing sort of pushback from people who believe that what is being done in schools is no longer useful or relevant to the society we live in a way that makes life quite sort of difficult for teachers and schools and people who are sort of blamed for sort of cooping up children in classrooms instead of letting them get on with their lives and so on. There have been a lot of myths put around that education is no longer useful. So there are 7 myths which are often put about, which I'll try to start by adjusting for anyone who still has some doubts about whether it's useful to become learned. So first one is that children don't need to learn facts anymore because facts prevent children from understanding the reality of things. So, yes. The idea that someone memorizing, let's say, historical dates is no longer useful. In fact, if you are a teacher, you would know that for a child to use understanding on a deeper level, they need to base it on a whole lot of facts which they already have in their mind, which they can then build upon towards an understanding of what's going on in the present-day situation. So without those facts, then they are left with nothing to work with. A second sort of problem, which is often put about, is that if instruction is led by a teacher, then the children are just on the receiving end, so they're not actually doing anything. It's like the teacher is doing all the work for them, so therefore you need to let them have discovery learning. Well, there's quite a famous leader for this country, Winston Churchill, who was actually really bad in school. And he got put in detention quite a lot. And you know what they made him do in detention? A lot of grammar exercises. But out of learning the grammar, he later on in life said that those were the things that allowed him to become such a great orator later in life. The fact that he got all the grammar and the way to use language right from an early age because of that very sort of mechanical learning which he did as a youngster. It actually helped him become one of his most powerful character features later in life that basically helped everyone win the war and whatever. Third myth is that in the 21st century, everything's changed, so you can't use the old educational system anymore because we have things like internet. And if you don't know something, then you should go out and learn about new and modern things because they are up to date and what everyone needs to know about. The trouble is that by the time they cotton on to the things that are new and modern and need to be known about, they usually have already gone out of date. So there was a time when everyone was supposed to learn WordPerfect and programming in BASIC, because they were new and modern. But in retrospect now, we can see that those are completely useless, both of them. And in fact, what most teachers find is that although there are new things that come in, mostly it's the new things that change the most, whereas the old stuff actually doesn't change that much at all. It sort of, there's not too much revisions made of it, and they carry on being useful for much longer. Fourth myth is that if you don't know something, then you can just look it up, because they have Google for that, right? It's true that you can find out a lot by trawling on the internet. It's said that the sort of research that would have taken 15 years before probably would only take a few days of going through internet searches these days. So definitely a lot of things have changed. The trouble with it nowadays is that there's so much information that if you don't have a sense of curating the information and the idea of what's more important than other things, or an idea of the structure of what you're looking at, then you can't find what you're looking for. So the internet is new and it's useful, but it doesn't change everything. You still need the sort of knowledge structures in order to make that access to information useful. We should teach only transferable skills, some people say. It's no use learning things like Latin and, well, who wants to know what the name of a plant means anyway? We don't need things like arithmetic because we've got calculators. But if you hit the 0 button on your calculator one time too many, and your answer comes out 10 times more than it needs to be, then if you don't have some idea of arithmetic, then you will never notice that your calculator has given you the wrong answer, for example. Sixth myth, that projects and activities are the best way to learn. They can learn to run their own business from the time they're in the classroom, think like an expert. Don't need losers like teachers to teach them things. Well, it's said that if you just copy entrepreneurs and their behavior without understanding why they do things, then it doesn't turn you into an entrepreneur. It turns you into something rather like what's known as the cargo cults, where people put all their faith in the sort of outward or external aspects of people's behavior instead of understanding what's going on beneath the surface. All the knowledge and facts within the mind of an entrepreneur or an expert on which they base their spontaneous decisions. So it's not just about being spontaneous, they're doing that on the basis of a lot of experience that has gone before. So that's actually what the classroom ought to be providing rather than just the behaviors of experts. And lastly, some people say that teaching any sort of knowledge is indoctrination because it's like, oh, maybe the teachers have got some hidden agenda and they want to sort of put over some sort of neoliberal thinking, indoctrinate all the children with this because they've made choices about what's worth teaching and what's not worth teaching. You could say that's true, but in fact, most of the teachers I know, usually they see the value not just of teaching within the comfort zone, but actually pushing children into new ways of thinking that they have not come across before, to provide a safe space in which they can experiment with new ideas and meet new cultures and compare what they have and what they know with things that they haven't learned about yet. Sometimes they need to be pushed to do that. So in fact, what teachers are doing is actually a very valuable job. And hence, learning still continues to be a blessing, despite what some people might say. Within the Buddhist context, the word for learning is the word Bahusutta, which is from the Indian language of Pali. And what it actually means literally is one who has heard a lot. So a person who's heard a lot will be a knowledgeable person. Usually a person who is heard so much that not much surprises them anymore, perhaps. But knowledge, as we shall see, is not just a simple thing to understand, because knowledge in the classroom, for all the great things I just said about it, is not the ultimate of knowledge. Just as theoretical knowledge is not the ultimate of knowledge. The ways we learn about things in the classroom or learn from textbooks or even learn from vocational courses, all that would be counted as knowledge, even within this blessing. And I'm not saying that it's not a blessing, but it's still not the same sort of knowledge that we are talking about when we're thinking about transcendental knowledge or the sort of knowledge that comes from meditation. And there's a very interesting metaphor for how the mind deals with deeper knowledge, which comes from Buddhist scriptures. And in that scripture, the Buddha talks about the metaphor of a person looking into a rock pool. If the rock pool water is clouded, then just by looking at the surface of the water, you can only guess at what might be underneath. And that requires knowledge too, right? Because if you have some sort of knowledge of aquatic biology, then you can probably guess what's making the ripples on the surface of the water, even though you cannot see directly what's going on under the water. However, if the water has suddenly become clear instead of clouded, then you can see directly what's going on under the water. And that would be seen as a sort of direct knowledge or direct understanding. I'm sorry if the fonts are not so clear. The first sort of knowledge, where you are making inferences based on previous knowledge or textbook knowledge or even practical knowledge, this is all either theoretical or occupational knowledge. But where you have the knowledge that comes from seeing directly what's going on under the water because the water has become clear, that would be equivalent to the sort of knowledge that would come from a clear mind or self-understanding that comes from the ability to see within oneself directly instead of just making inferences about one's feelings or whatever. See the difference? So there are different levels of knowledge. The sort of knowledge I'm talking about today are generally the first two, theoretical knowledge and hands-on knowledge, which probably need to get your reading glasses out. Theoretical knowledge is still a blessing, as I've said. It's worth learning, even those sorts of theoretical knowledge. The first level, theoretical knowledge, in the Buddhist terminology is known as Sutta Maya Panya. And if you are ungenerous, you might refer to it as parrot learning or learning by rote. But it's referred to as basic knowledge because it arises via your 5 external senses. So what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've tasted, and so on. It may even come secondhand to you by listening to information such as lectures or from reading textbooks. But if you can imagine the little child who's told by their parents, don't touch fire, it's hot, it'll burn you, but they still want to touch it anyway because they don't quite believe everything they've heard, because they want the practical experience of something. And that would be, to learn the real meaning of the word hot, would be what's known as hands-on knowledge, which is in the second rung of knowledge, which is to do with taking what you've learned theoretically and applying it to the real situation. In actual fact, this is what all employers want. They don't want just textbook knowledge. They want people who can put that knowledge into some practical purpose. Those two together are really what we're talking about at this level of the blessings of life. But what I'm saying is that even though it's not transcendental knowledge, even though the mind is not yet clear, but even that experience and inference is still very valuable, especially when it comes to earning a living and standing on one's own 2 feet. And to that extent, it is a blessing. Second level, the hands-on knowledge, so the child actually putting their finger in the flame, is known as Cinta Maya Panya. So it's no longer textbook knowledge, it's actually direct knowledge of the real situation. But the third level of knowledge, which we're studying when we're meditating, is a different level completely, the level of the clear rock pool, where you can see directly into the mind and into the nature of yourself or into the nature of what's going on beneath the surface of yourself. That is known as insight knowledge or Bhavana Maya Panya. So a rather more lofty sort of knowledge, which doesn't come from textbooks, which comes from the mind becoming clear. The way it's understood in meditation is that actually you don't need to go looking for the knowledge in your meditation because it's already there, but it's just hidden. But what you're doing in a meditation practice is helping to make that water clearer so that you can then see directly what's going on under the surface. Yeah? But that's for another day. What we're interested in talking about today is the sense of the theoretical knowledge which comes to us in the educational situation. What's the difference between being learned, so first two sorts of knowledge, and being wise, which is the inside knowledge? Well, sometimes the wise are not necessarily those who have spent a long time in school. Sometimes you get the sort of, I don't know, the peasant sort of leaning on the garden gate, and they can understand the nature of the world very clearly just from their experience. So the wisdom might be rather different from having a degree in something. Usually wisdom comes together with a sense of good habits and virtue, whereas people who have a lot of academic knowledge may still be sneaky people or misappropriate their knowledge for the wrong sort of ends. A person who is learned and who does well in school generally has quite a good memory, because they need to remember and regurgitate what they have learned, whereas a person who's wise may not necessarily have a good memory for small details, but they know the general gist of what's right or wrong in their habits. And a person who's learned, it's not a guarantee that they might not end up behind bars, because they may be unscrupulous as well as educated. But wisdom generally weeds out the unscrupulous part from the knowledge part. So you're left with knowledge that would bring genuine benefit to oneself and to others. So today I'll finish with a little story, and I'll do a quick change of story, looking at your faces. It's a story about a monk who was very knowledgeable. And for the sake of argument, we're going to call him the blank scripture monk. And this is a little story from the Buddhist scriptures to illustrate the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Yeah? Interested? Yes, okay. So, once upon a time, it's going back 2,000 years, there was a certain monk. You'd probably call him a professor or a lecturer in a university, because he was so knowledgeable and so had such a good memory for all the little intricacies of the teachings which the Buddha had taught. And if anyone asked, when did the Buddha say such and such, oh, he could give you quite a clear exposition about all the details of it. And all his students, many of whom had studied with him for many years, had taken their knowledge, gone off and meditated, and many of them had become enlightened as a result of this. However, Mr. Professor, the blank scripture monk, he never had used his knowledge for anything. All he'd done is collect more and more of it. So he was very respected as a teacher, but somehow, despite his seniority, he hadn't managed to achieve what monks are really supposed to do, which is to get enlightened as a result of their studies. So one day, the Buddha was looking at the audience of monks, and he noticed this Mr. Blank scripture monk. Despite his seniority, was about the only monk left who hadn't got any sort of enlightenment experience. The Buddha thought to himself, how can I humble this guy into making some use out of his knowledge? So the Buddha started to treat him in a special way. Every time this professor or monk started to come for an audience, he wouldn't talk to him, he'd just greet him with the words, "Oh, so you've joined us again, Mr. Blank Scripture." And then after that, he'd just ignore him and talk to other monks. And then when he got up to leave, he said, "Oh, so you're leaving us now, Mr. Blank Scripture." And this happened again and again. He wouldn't engage him in any intellectual conversation anymore. He'd just greet him when he arrived and say goodbye with the words "Blank Scripture" or whenever he left. Until eventually, Professor Blank Scripture started to think to himself, there must be a reason why the Buddha is doing this to me. Before he was very nice to me, he had all the intellectual conversations, but now he's not talking to me anymore. He's calling me Mr. Blank Scripture instead. He must be getting at something. And because he was very expert in all the theoretical aspects of things, he realized it's because I only have this theoretical knowledge, I only have the hands-on knowledge, but I don't have the inside knowledge. So what I really must do is go and learn how to turn my knowledge into insights. So he went first of all to one of his most senior students who had managed to get enlightenment as what's known as an arahant, or one who is no longer going to be reborn because they have got such a high level of meditation experience. But the senior one said, what you really need is to go to one of these young monks who's got the strength and the effort to be able to put you through the paces much more than I can. So he sent him off to a more junior monk. And Mr. Professor Guy, he felt this was already rather an embarrassment. You know, instead of being seen to learn from a senior student of his, he's having to learn from a more junior one, which is like a real come down. But the junior one said, no, I think what you really need is to study with one of these really young guys. The young guys who's fresh to the whole subject. They'll be able to put you through your paces much better than I can. So he got passed down the seniority of the monks until he ended up with a novice. But a novice who had become enlightened as an arahant. And the novice, in his wisdom, saw that Mr. Professor still hasn't learned his lesson yet. He's still arrogant. He still thinks he knows it all. He's still not ready to practice. So the novice said to him, do you really want to study with me? And he said, okay, yes, I've been humbled this far, so maybe I need to be accept whatever teachings you can give me. And the novice said to him, I think to hear this teaching, it would be best if you went and stood in the middle of the river. So the monk waded out into the river, and he was going to wade in up to his neck, and the novice said, just stop there, up to your waist is enough. Because he saw that, it's like he got no pride left whatsoever anymore. Now he was about to be able to open up to something which the novice would be able to teach him. So there he was, Mr. Professor Blank Scripture monk, standing in the middle of the river, about to listen to this child who's going to teach him how to turn his theoretical knowledge into insight knowledge. And he said, are you ready? And he said, yes, I am. I'm going to accept anything you teach me at this point. And he said, okay, listen carefully. Here's a metaphor for you. There was once a termite mound. Ever seen a termite mound? Like sort of cone-shaped thing, which termites make out of sand or whatever. And in the termite mound there are 5 holes. And inside that termite mound there is a lizard, which you have to catch. Sorry, termite mound has 6 holes in it. Inside that termite mound there is a lizard which you have to catch. What are you going to do about it? And immediately, because of his knowledge, because of his hands-on knowledge, because of his theoretical knowledge, he could immediately see that the novice was referring in allegory to the 5 senses, plus the extra 1 sense, which is the sense of the mind. So 5 external senses, 1 internal sense, which is the mind, which is able to visualize or see something on the inside of us. And he answered, you have to plug 5 holes and leave 1 hole left over for the lizard to run out of, and then you grab it. Yeah? And the novice said, exactly right. You already got the point. So what he realized is that I must come away from the 5 senses, the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, taste, but I must concentrate on the 1 sense that is left to me, which is the sense of the mind, and cultivate that in order to catch the lizard, which is the metaphor for enlightenment. So he went away and immediately trained himself according to the novice's instruction, and within a very short period of time he managed to upgrade himself from mere theoretical knowledge, mere hands-on knowledge, to insight knowledge from direct clarification of the mind. So Mr. Blank Scripture Monk then thereby became a monk worth his salt, as it were. But the reason he was able to become enlightened so quickly was because he had such a good foundation of theoretical and hands-on knowledge to start with. That's the message for today. For today, I'd like to finish off with a few little announcements. This is our Tuesday class. Generally, it consists of a wisdom talk and 30 minutes of meditation. There's also a Thursday talk for anyone who's interested, where we sit for meditation a little bit longer, and often the talks are in a little bit more depth as well. Apart from that, coming up in next month, we have our first weekend meditation retreat. Starts on a Friday evening, runs until Sunday afternoon, where you can stay over here. These are dormitories up on the two sides, and practice meditation for the whole weekend, which may be interesting to you. If you've already done daily meditation to a certain level and you'd like to take it a little bit further, then that might be something you'd like to look into. You can sign up for it on the temple website, and I believe the cost involved is about £70 for all the catering over the weekend. For gentlemen who are interested to take it further than that, you can try out being a monk for 2 weeks or a month during the summer, and we hope that COVID, of course, will have gone away completely by then, allowing us to have more freedom to do in-person activities like this. That will be for the beginning of June and possibly for the whole of the month of June for those who are interested. Generally, we run the course in Belgium so that all the different branches of our organization from all over Europe can send their trainee monks together for the training retreat. Apart from that, for those who like to meditate at home but maybe have already forgotten how to meditate, there is support for meditation in the form of an app called MindGem, MINDGEM, which you can download onto your phone, and it's got lots of meditation audio tracks which you can listen to as you are meditating to encourage you to keep that habit going in your daily life. And I would recommend that you take what you've learned today and try to meditate for 20 minutes a day at minimum, in order to keep that habit going, allow your mind to get that clarity, which will lead eventually to that insight meditation. Apart from that, we still work online on every Saturday evening. For those of you who maybe are unable to join us in person but find it more convenient to meditate from home, between 7 and 8 British time, we have what's known as the DMEU meditation, which allows you to join via Zoom, meditate and hear a talk online from the comfort of your home. And in 2 weeks' time here, maybe signaled by lots of little candles and lanterns which you see decorating the place, especially today, we have what's known as a full moon meditation, which is meditation plus a little candle lighting ceremony and a themed talk, which the theme this time will be the spreading of the light of hope. And because it is a crossover with what's known as Maka Puja Day in the Buddhist calendar, then we will have a chance to fill the whole of this room with little candle lights as well. So it's usually a very nice ceremony to be able to join for any of you who are free 2 weeks from today at the same time. So that's all I have for you today, but if there are any questions or comments or feedback at this point, I would be very happy to help out.
Okay, so if anyone has a question related to the meditation techniques or the content in the wisdom talk, please raise your hands up. And you feel free to ask any questions directly to the monk. Right, seems like no one has any questions. So.
You want to stand up to your waist in water first? Yes, go on. Sorry, say it again.
The symbol of this, wait, this symbol. No. Oh, the symbol, the flag.
The red one? The red one? Okay. Yes. It's the logo for our Dhammakaya meditation organization is a pagoda, which is the major landmark of our home temple in Thailand. The pagoda itself is made up of lots of tiny Buddha statues, quite similar to the one you can see behind there. That's a sort of expanded version of it, but it's said to symbolize nirvana. Yes. So it's a sort of something to aim for in our practice. Yeah.
Any questions? All right. Okay. Seems like there's no question at all. So here it's come to the end of the event. May I invite everyone to pay respect to the teaching monk by bowing 3 times. Bow, bow, bow.
So may all of you be blessed with knowledge on all 3 levels as a result of your following the wisdom talk and also meditating today. So may you be endowed with theoretical knowledge, hands-on knowledge, and insight knowledge in every aspect of your life from here on in.
May I invite everyone to pay homage to the Lord Buddha by bowing 3 times. Bow, bow, bow. And that's the end of the event today. May I rejoice in everyone's meditation experience today. All right. Yes. And okay, before leaving, could you please, we have a sanitizing wipe provided.